Join as we learn Chumash for Tuesday, Parshas Tzav, chapter 7, verse 11. Yesterday we learned about the different meal offerings that the Kohen would bring or that the high priest would have to bring every day, as well as the different sacrifices and sin offerings and the continuation of the sin offerings. Today we continue into different peace offerings, the Thanksgiving offering, and the different details pertaining to the peace offering, as well as the forbidden fats and blood, and the prerequisites for the Kohen when he eats from the peace offering. Verse 11. This will be the regulations governing the special peace offering, which would be brought on a feast, Zevach HaShlomim, that he must bring to God. As we're going to see, the Torah is now going to talk about a special Thanksgiving offering. A Thanksgiving offering were generally brought in 4 different occasions after a person goes on a transoceanic, goes across the ocean, or if he goes through the desert, or he's in captivity, or if there was an illness that caused him to be bedridden for at least 3 days, then he would have to bring this Thanksgiving offering. Verse 12. As he continues, and Rashi will tell us about these cases of when a person brings this offering. Verse 12. If he is bringing this sacrifice in order to give thanks, therefore he must bring along with this Thanksgiving feast offering, 10 unleavened loaves, blulis pashemen, which were kneaded with oil, mixed with oil, urikike matzis, and then 10 flat unleavened loaves, meshuchim hashemen, which were smeared with oil, v'seilas murubeches, and then flour mixed with oil as well, which was then boiled with oil, chalis, blulis pashemen, mixed with oil. Rashi, imal toida yakrivenu, what does it mean if he's bringing it for a Thanksgiving? If the person's bringing it, as Rashi says, he's thanking God for a miracle that happened to him. Kegoin, what kind of miracle? Those that goes across the ocean in the boats. The bodies and those that go in the desert. And those that were in captivity. Or it's a person who is ill and now became better. That they have to give thanks to God. How do we know that they have to give thanks to God? As it says in Psalm 107, those that give thanks to God for His wonders that He's done to people, and they give sacrifices of thanks. If of one of these things, Nadar Shlomim Alalu, where he is meant to give thanks, he also made a vow that he would bring a peace offering. So therefore, it's not the regular peace offering. They are now shalmei toidahin. They are peace offerings of giving thanks, and because of that, they need more than just the regular peace offering. Number one, they have to be brought together with the bread as mentioned, as well as it can only be eaten for the first day and night, not like a regular peace offering that can be eaten for 2 days and 1 night. This has to be eaten in 1 day and 1 night. These 4 different kinds of bread that are about to be mentioned here, the chalas, which is the loaves of bread, the matzahs, and the boiled matzahs. These are 3 different kinds of matzahs. And then there's a 4th kind, which is a chametz. These were all unleavened, non-chametz kind. However, that along with this came another one, which was a chametz. V'chol minu min eser chalas. Each one of them were 10 loaves, as explained in the tractate of Menachos. V'shiyudan, and how much had to be made? Chamish sani Yerushalmius, which 5 sa of the Jerusalemite measure. Shehain, which that would calculate sheish midbariya 6 sa that was in the desert. Esrim Yisarin, which is a calculation of 10 Isarin, which would be Isarin, which means 1/10 of an ephah. So that would make that all the 10 chalas have to be at least 1 ephah. If you do the calculation, it would be the type of grain offering. He has to bring unleavened loaves mixed with oil would be 10 times 1 of an ephah. That's 1/3 of an ephah. Then with 1/8 of a lug of oil with each one. Merubeches, the word merubeches means lechem chalut bereischin kol tzarkei, a bread that was scalded, like it was boiled in water, boiling water, and that's the way it was fully finished, edible to eat. Verse 13, al chalis lechem chametz, Not only that, he had not only the first three unleavened breads, but now types of unleavened breads. Now he also has to bring a leavened bread, chametz. Yakriv karbani has to bring the sacrifice. So he has to bring, along with the 10 loaves of bread, he has to bring the sacrifice, al zevach teida shlomav, together with the peace offering that he's giving thanksgiving for. Rashi, Yaakov Karbani al Zevach, Magid she'ein alechem kodesh kedushas haguf. That teaches us, when he tells us that he depends the sacrifice together with these loaves of bread, it's teaching us that the bread itself does not become holy on its own. That in order for this bread to become unfit, it would have to be only once it was brought, meaning that the breads, these loaves of the Todah, are dependent, the thanksgiving loaves that he brings along with the sacrifice are dependent on the offering. That as long as the offering has not yet been brought as a sacrifice, all these breads are not considered holy. They only become holy once the sacrifice is brought, then the breads that come along with it considered holy as well. Verse 14. V'hikri v'menu echad mikol karban trumal Hashem. From these 40 loaves, he must bring one of each as an offering to Hashem, as a raised offering to Hashem, la kohen, to the kohen, hazoyrek oisam, and they have to be then given to the kohen who sprinkles the blood, the stam hashlamim, the blood from the peace offering. La yiyah, he's the one that gets to keep to eat these loaves. Rashi, echad mikol karban, lechem echad mikol minumin. He takes one bread of each kind. Yitail truma lakoyin oived avidasa. The owners have to then take it and give it to the kohen who does the actual work. V'hashar, the leftover 9, nechal labaylam, the owners can eat it. Ubisara, and the flesh of the actual sacrifice, also labaylam, also go to the owners. Chutz mechazav v'sheik shabah, besides the thigh and the limb that go, those are the gifts that have to be given, the side that has to be given to the kohenim, kamishim afurish lamata, like we explained later on in verses 30 and 34, the tufis chazik v'sheik b'shlamim, that you give the side and the hip of the peace offering has to be given to the kohen. Hatoida kruya shlamim, and a gift offering, a thanksgiving offering, is called a peace offering as well. Verse 15. However, what if the 15, and the flesh of this thanksgiving peace offering must be eaten on the day that the sacrifice is brought. Should not leave anything over until the morning. Rashi, in this verse, the language is telling me a lot of extra mitzvahs. Number one, meaning a lot of things which we know that have to be included. This is also including the sin offering and the guilt offering and the ram of a Nazarite. And so too the karban chagiga that came with the paschal offering. That all of these that only have to be eaten, they have one day and one night to eat them. The same amount of time that you have to eat the flesh of the animal, you have to be able to eat the bread. One should not leave it until the morning, but he's able to eat it all night. Why then did the sages say one can only eat it until midnight? And as we learn in the first Mishnah in Brachos, in order to keep a person away, that the rabbis were tasked with making fences to the mitzvahs, that we don't want a person to abrogate the commandment, so therefore we set fences and give a time which is earlier, even though technically they can eat it until dawn. Verse 16. But if a sacrifice is because of a vow or a dedication, then on the day, he may be eaten on the day that he offers up a sacrifice. He can eat it that day. And also whatever's left over from it, he can also eat it on. He can eat it, whatever's left over, he can eat it on the next day as well. Rashi 16. Meaning, the reason why the person is bringing the sacrifice is not because something special happened to him and he's thanking God for the miracle. And therefore does not need to have bread brought along with it. And it can be brought and eaten for 2 days. Like it's explained. Meaning, Barishen yachal. They should eat it. That means if whatever they haven't eaten on the first day and they have some leftovers, they can eat it. Yachal, they can eat it on the second day. We have a lot of this extra vav that we have here. We have a lot of times in different psukim that it tells us a vav by each one, telling us that whatever's left over, same idea over here, it can eat it on the next day as well. Verse 17. And then whatever's left over from the flesh on the third day, should then be burnt in the fire. Verse 18, if however a person goes along and eats some of that flesh of the peace offering that was eaten, on the third day, then it would not be accepted by God. The one who brought it as a sacrifice, it will not be counted for him. Rather, pigul yiyeh, this will be considered contemptible, something which God doesn't like. And somebody who eats it on the third day, he will bear his sin, which is a premature death and childless. Rashi, v'im hayachel yachel, meaning, from the verse it tells us that the actual action of eating it after its time can actually, one may think, that would invalidate the sacrifice. So what does he say? We're not talking about where a person had left over and then we say that it invalidates the slaughtering. We're talking about when a person, while he's bringing the sacrifice, he has intent that he has intent to eat it on the third day. Then that will invalidate the sacrifice. If it so happens to be that there's leftovers and he eats it on the third day, then there's something wrong with that. That's a separate story. But over here we're talking about that if while the person is bringing the sacrifice, he then has intent to only eat it on 3 days or for a third day, that it will invalidate the actual sacrifice itself. Yachol, I would think, that if a person actually eats it on the third day, then it will invalidate the sacrifice retroactively. Talmud Loimar, therefore the pasuk says, the one that brings it, it will not be considered. Only if there's intent at the time of bringing the sacrifice that he wants to eat it on the third day, but not because he ate it on the third day, will it retroactively make the sacrifice invalid. This is also what it means. While he's bringing it, should not even think about that. But if he thinks about it, then it's contemptible. Even if a person eats it during the time, meaning because you had intent to eat it after the time, even if you eat it during the time, it's still considered invalid and you still carry the sin because of your thought of eating it later. Verse 19. The flesh of a peace offering that touches anything defiled, must not be eaten, but should be burnt. And the flesh of anyone who is not ritually defiled may eat from this flesh. This is talking about, not about contemptible meat that we mentioned in the previous one, but we're talking about here specifically about meat which was from a peace offering sacrifice. Any meat of a peace offering that was touched by somebody who is impure, it makes it impure as well. The flesh, including which some of it may have gone out of the boundaries of where it was meant to be eaten. The inside, the part that was left inside, is allowed to be eaten. The part that went outside is not allowed to be eaten as well. Kol ter yechal basar. Ma Talmud Leimud. Why does it have to tell me that every person who's pure is allowed to eat it? Because it says by peace offering that the blood of the sacrifices will be poured out. But the meat is eaten. Yochel, I would think, that the only one that can eat the meat are the owners of the sacrifice. Like Achnemar. Therefore, the Torah tells us Kol ter yechal basar, that any person who is pure is allowed to eat from it, not only the owners. Verse 20. And the person who eats from the flesh of the peace offering to God, while he was while he's impure, that person will be cut off from his people, meaning he will die prematurely and childless. V'tumasi alav. What is the Torah referring here? This is talking about betumas guf. It's talking about when the actual person is impure. But when a person eats, if he's a pure person that ate a non-kosher, non-pure meat, then the punishment is not karis, elazhara, it's only a prohibition, a negative prohibition that he has. That we mentioned before, that the flesh that eats anything, if tameh should not eat it. The law pertaining a impure person eating something which is pure is not clearly stated in the Torah. The rabbis have learned it by connecting two similar words. Therefore, from the very fact that an impure going into the holy temple, which there the Torah says one's not allowed to do it, then as well when its punishment is, so too they apply it for a person who eats something which is pure while he's in a state of impurity. The 3 times that the Torah uses the terminology that a person will be cut off is talking about when a person eats holy items while he himself might be unholy. One of them is going to be later on in chapter 22, and 2 of them were in this pasuk and in the next pasuk as well. And the rabbis learned it in the tractate of Shavuos, achas leklal va'achas leprat. One is telling me a general rule, meaning the general rule that every person must be pure while eating from the sacrifice, as well as one is for prat, meaning telling me an exception to the rule, as well va'achas lelamed al korban elavayeret, and one comes to tell me about a separate sacrifice, a sacrifice which we talk about when, depending, as we mentioned earlier, depending on the person's value of what he can contribute, and that's considered a korban elavayeret, shalinemer el al tumas mikdash uktashav, because being that over here from this actual verse, this extra time it tells it us, this verse is only telling us about a mistaken case where a person may not realize if he is impure or if he did not know the law about going into the holy temple while he's impure, and therefore it tells us about the case of the sin offering, and putting them 3 together help us to understand what the exceptions are to the rule and what the rules are to the exception as well. Verse 21, V'nefesh kisiga b'chol tameh, and any person that will touch something which is impure, betumas adam, whether it's an impurity of a person or meant by human, for example, if he touched a carcass or anything of that nature, or a animal that's impure, sheketz tameh, or he eats, or a person that will touch any creature, which is also you're not allowed to. Then he eats from the flesh of the holy peace offering, the sacrifice of the peace offering, asher Lashem, which is to God, and that person will be cut off from his people, meaning he'll die prematurely. Verse 22. And God spoke to Moshe, saying, Daber b'nei Yisrael, speak to the Jewish people, saying, Kol chelav sher v'chezav, any fats. Now we're going to go into the laws pertaining to the forbidden fats and blood. Kol chelav sher v'chezav ve'ez le'sechelu, any fats from a ox, sheep, or goat, must not be eaten. Verse 24, v'chelav nevela, and the fats of a animal, meaning a permitted animal, but it died by means which were not ritual slaughter, a dead animal. V'chelav treifa, or by the fats of a animal which suffered a fatal injury or disease, and therefore, even though it may have been slaughtered, but you see that this animal was sick, and that's why it's called a treifa. Yase ye'asa l'chol malacha, it can be used for any other type of work, but still in all, v'ochel esichlu, one is not allowed to eat it. Meaning, both because it is forbidden to eat sacrificial fat, as well as it's forbidden to eat any part of an animal, and that's where the word treif comes from, as we'll see in Rashi. It comes to tell us that fats does not, with the very fact that it tells us that we're allowed to use it, it tells us that it does not impure the individual, or else you wouldn't be allowed to use it. Though you're allowed to use it, but you're still not allowed to eat it. Omra Torah, the Torah says, Yavik Isur Nevela Treifa, let the prohibition of a nevela and a treifa, which means an animal which died without slaughtering, or an animal that was slaughtered but you see that it wasn't healthy, v'yachal al Isur Chelav, and it will then apply, which applies to all the meat, and let it apply to the prohibition of its fats. She'ima choloi, that if a person were to eat its fats from this dead animal, Yischayev alav shel nevela, then they will be abrogating the law pertaining, which is the prohibition of eating a nevela, eating a dead animal without slaughter. Besides, for the prohibition of eating fats, which is prohibited, then there's another prohibition of eating something which is a dead animal without slaughter. One cannot say, because generally we say that if something already is prohibited, you can't add a prohibition on it. But in this case, we do say a prohibition is added to it, that if a person were to eat the fats of a dead animal that was not slaughtered, not only are you eating from a dead animal that wasn't slaughtered, but you're also having another prohibition of eating forbidden fats. Verse 25. Because anyone who would eat fats from an animal species from which sacrifices are brought from it, that sacrifices are brought to it for God, the person who will eat such type of fats will be cut off from his people, which is that he dies prematurely. Verse 26, as well as you must not consume any blood, in any of your dwelling places, not only from animals, but also from birds as well. Rashi, this excludes the fact that the Torah says specifically birds and animals. This excludes blood from fish and blood from grasshoppers that are not part of that obligation and prohibition that one is allowed to consume the blood from a fish. The obligation and the prohibition of not consuming blood is an obligation on the human, on the entity, on the body of the individual. It doesn't go where a person lives. For example, the obligation of tithing would be on agriculture only if you have a field. If you don't have a field, you don't have to tithe from the field. So neheges b'chol meishavis, therefore it applies wherever a person may be, whether in the land of Israel, whether outside the land of Israel as well. And in the Tractate of Kedushin, in this chapter 1, he explains there in the Talmud, why does the Torah have to say by the prohibition of fats and blood that it applies everywhere, if it already, as we said previously, in every generation? Because one can say these two mitzvahs have to do with sacrifices. And maybe you would say it only applies when there was a holy temple. So therefore the Torah comes to tell me that they apply anywhere, wherever you are, even when there is no holy temple, one is not allowed to consume blood or the forbidden fats. Verse 27. Any person that may eat can consume blood, that person will be cut off from his people. Verse 28. Now we're going to go into the peace offerings and the prerequisites of what the Kohanim get from every peace offering. God spoke to Moshe saying, speak to the Jewish people, saying, when one brings a peace offering, Lashem to God, he must bring his peace offering, his sacrifice to God. What this means, as Rashi explains. As we continue in the next verse, Yad of Tivienas Ishe Hashem, his own hands must bring this fire offering to God. Esachelev, he will include in it the fats al hachaza, which he must bring to the from the slaughtering place, the fats that are on top of the breast. Yevienu, he must bring it. Esachaza, he also must bring the breast in itself and the thigh, as we'll soon see. Lahanif oyisei tnufon tenefel Hashem. He has to bring it to wave it and to make it as a wave offering before God. Let's see what Rashi says and explains what's going on here. Yadiv tiviena. What does it mean that his hands have to bring it? That means from every peace offering there were prerequisites and parts that had to be given to the Kohen. When it was given to the Kohen, the fats and the thigh and the breasts of it, and the thigh as well, the owners had to be on top and the Kohen's hand had to be on the bottom, and that's the way they would wave it, and that would be part of the service of the Kohen and part of how you would bring a sacrifice. As Ishe Hashem, the godly sacrifices. Mahema Ishim, what are the sacrifices? What are the sacrifices that you are bringing, the fire offerings that you're bringing? Esachelav alachaza yevienu. Like the Torah continues to say, the fats and the breasts that you bring, because when you bring it back from the place where they cut up in the meat, that means there was a place in the Holy Temple on the side that there was a place that they would call like the butcher shop. Over there, they would cut up the meat and separate the animal into all different parts. So when you would bring it, you would have to bring the fats of the breast together with it. This way, afterwards, you would change the order. What happens when your owner of the sacrifices brings it to the one that's lifting it? The breast will be on top, and the fats will be on the bottom. Therefore, it says it someplace else, if the thigh of the donation and the breast of the elevation are brought with the fats of the sacrifice to lift, meaning that the verse is telling us that when a person lifts the items and he waves it to the different sides with the Kohen, you're going to have the breast is going to be together with the sacrifices with the fats. And after he waves it, he gives it to the Kohen who brings it onto the holy temple, and then it changes the order. Then the breast will come on the bottom. And this is what it says. And they put the fats on the thighs, and then they put the fats on the altar. From here we see that there are 3 Kohanim that are going to be part of this sacrifice. Kohen number 1 is who brings it to the place where they wave it. Kohen number 2, who takes it from Kohen 1 and brings it to Kohen 2, who then lifts it together with the owners, waving it to all different directions. And after the waving it, then they take the pieces from the owner to the Kohen, to the third Kohen, who the third Kohen then actually puts it on the altar. That's the way it's explained in the tractate of Menachos. The fats and the breasts they will bring. Why does he have to bring the breast? He's bringing it that it should be waved together with the Kohen. That's not the part that actually gets burnt on the altar. Because it says that my fire consumes the fats and the breast. I would think that also the breast gets burnt and consumed, as a sacrifice. Therefore, it says later on, as a chazal. The reason why he's bringing the breast because he has to wave it with the Kohen. But then from that, the fats gets burnt on the altar. The breast goes to the Kohen as one of his gifts that he gets. Verse 31. Then the Kohen will bring the fats on the altar as a sacrifice. And then the breast goes as a gift to Aaron and his sons. Rashi, and only afterwards does the breast go to Aaron. We learn from here that one can only eat, the Kohen can only eat the flesh from the sacrifice only once the other pieces already burning are there, that only once they're burnt on the altar. That means if they still haven't yet been burnt, one cannot eat from the sacrifice. Verse 32, and you must give the right thigh. Titun, you will give Truma L'Kohen as a donation to the priest, as a raised offering to the Kohen, Mizivche Shalmeichem from your feast offerings. Verse 32, Rashi, Shoy Kayamin. Shoik, what does it mean? The thigh, from the part of the thigh which is connected to the top, which is recognized together with the head, until the middle bone. That means till the middle section of the actual leg, which that's called the middle, the knee of the leg. Verse 33. And any of the sons of Aaron, who are the ones to offer up the blood and peace offering, they're the ones that get the right thigh. Verse 33, Rashi, only one who is befitting to sprinkle the blood, and to be able to bring its fats. Over here it tells us that this is excluding someone who may be not eligible. For example, he was impure at the time while the blood was being and the sacrifice was being brought, that he cannot partake in the flesh of this of the gifts of the sacrifice. Verse 34. For I have taken the breast as a wave offering, and the thigh be used as a raised offering. Lokachti, I took Meis Bnei Yisrael from the Jewish people, Mazivche Shalmeim from their peace offerings. Ve'etenesam l'Aaron HaKohen, I gave it to Aaron the priest, to Labanav and his sons, the Chok Olam as a statute as entitlement, as an internal entitlement, Meis Bnei Yisrael from the Jewish people. Verse 34, Hatanufa Hatruma. What does it mean, the one that's waved and the one that's raised? Moilich umevi. He brings it to him and he lifts it to all four directions, like we do with the lulav. Mailo moirid brings it up and down. Verse 35. Zeis mishchas arer mishchas banav. This is what is due to the Kohanim from the fire offerings. This is what is due for Aaron and his sons. This is what Aaron is anointed for, and Aaron's sons who were anointed. That they are able to get from the fire offerings on the day that God brought him close, that they should be the Kohanim for God. Verse 36. This is what God commanded that they should be given. On the day that he anointed them, from the Jewish people, an eternal entitlement for them and for all generations. Verse 37. These that we just read before, everything we just learned, are the laws and the regulations pertaining the ascent offering, the meal offering, v'lachatas and the sin offering, v'la'asham and the guilt offering, v'la'miluyim and for the installation offering, ulazavacham shlamim, and for the peace offerings. V'la'miluyim, Rashi explains, on the day that Aaron and his sons will be installed as Kohanim. Verse 38, Asher tziva Hashem es Moshe, that God commanded Moses, Bahar Sinai and Mount Sinai, b'yom Tzav b'nei Yisrael, on the day that he commanded the Jewish people, lahakriv es karbaneim, to bring their sacrifices l'Hashem to God, b'midbar Sinai, in the Sinai desert. This concludes the third Torah reading for Parshas Tzav.